In the spring of 1944, while Allied generals planned the greatest invasion in military history, a 31-year-old American woman named Virginia Hall sat alone in a farmhouse in central France, encoding a message that would help determine the fate of the free world. And outside her window, German patrols hunted for the spy. The Gestapo had named the most dangerous of all Allied agents, and what made Virginia Hall so extraordinary was not just her courage or her brilliance, but the fact that she accomplished all of this with one leg, because the woman who would become the only civilian woman to receive the Distinguished Service Cross had lost her left leg in a hunting accident years before the war began. Virginia Hall was born in Baltimore, Maryland, in 1906, to a wealthy family that expected her to marry well and live quietly, but Virginia had other plans, and she spent the 1930s traveling through Europe learning French and German and Italian, working at American embassies and consulates, dreaming of becoming a Foreign Service officer, only to be told again and again that women were not suited for diplomatic careers and that her disability made her application impossible. And so when war came to Europe in 1939, Virginia was working as a clerk at the American embassy in Paris, watching the world she loved fall apart and feeling utterly powerless to stop it. But what happened next changed everything, because when France fell to the Germans in June 1940, Virginia escaped to England, and there she encountered the Special Operations Executive, the secret British organization created by Winston Churchill to set Europe ablaze through sabotage and resistance, and the SOE did not care that Virginia was a woman or that she walked with a prosthetic leg. They cared only that she spoke perfect French and German, that she had lived in France for years, and that she was willing to risk her life to fight the Nazis. And in August 1941, Virginia Hall became one of the first Allied agents to be inserted into occupied France. She arrived in Lyon posing as a journalist for the New York Post, and for the next 15 months she built one of the most effective resistance networks in all of France, recruiting agents, organizing escape lines for downed Allied airmen, coordinating weapons, drops, and sabotage operations, and all the while evading the Gestapo, who knew only that someone could. Marie was operating in their territory, and that this person was responsible for an astonishing amount of damage to the German war effort. And what made her success even more remarkable was that she accomplished everything while managing constant pain from her prosthetic, which she privately named Cuth. And then something no one expected happened, because in November 1942, the Germans occupied all of France in response to the Allied invasion of North Africa, and suddenly Virginia's network was in immediate danger, and the Gestapo had finally learned her identity, and Klaus Barbie, the notorious butcher of Lyon, had made capturing the limping lady, as he called her, his personal mission. And Virginia was forced to flee, and the only escape route was over the Pyrenees Mountains into Spain in the middle of winter, and she made that crossing on foot through snow and ice, climbing 8,000 feet with a prosthetic leg, sending a message to London that read, "Cuthbert has given me trouble," and receiving the reply that if Cuthbert is giving you trouble, have him eliminated, not knowing that Cuthbert was her leg. She spent months recovering in Spain and then in England, but Virginia Hall was not finished, because in March 1944 she convinced the American Office of Strategic Services to send her back into France, this time as an American agent, and she parachuted into central France just weeks before D-Day, disguised as an elderly peasant woman, her hair dyed gray, her elegant features aged with makeup, and she immediately began rebuilding her networks, recruiting fighters, training resistance cells, and preparing for the invasion that would finally liberate the country she had come to love. What she discovered next would shake even her commanders, because as Virginia worked to coordinate resistance activities in the weeks before D, she uncovered critical intelligence about German defensive positions and troop movements that she transmitted directly to Allied headquarters, and this information helped planners understand exactly where German reinforcements would come from when the invasion began, and her resistance fighters were positioned to cut those reinforcement routes at exactly the right moment. And on June 6, 1944, when American and British soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy, the bridges and rail lines that would have brought German panzers rushing to the coast were already destroyed by fighters that Virginia Hall had organized and trained. In the months that followed, Virginia led her resistance army in open combat against German forces, directing ambushes and raids that killed or captured hundreds of enemy soldiers and liberated entire towns. And she did this while still evading the Gestapo, who never stopped hunting her even as their empire collapsed around them, and the farmers and villagers who fought beside her never forgot the American woman who had appeared out of nowhere, who walked with a limp but moved with the confidence of a general, and who treated every French life as precious, and every German defeat is a step toward freedom. Behind these ruins, a secret waited, because after the war, Virginia Hall's contributions were deliberately obscured by the secrecy that surrounded intelligence operations, and while men who had done far less received medals and parades, Virginia was quietly awarded the Distinguished Service Cross in a private ceremony that she requested because she hoped to continue working in intelligence and did not want publicity, and she went on to become one of the first female officers in the newly created Central Intelligence Agency, where she served until her retirement in 1966. Still fighting the Cold War with the same determination she had shown against the Nazis. Virginia Hall died in 1982 at the age of 76 in Rockville, Maryland, and for decades, her story remained largely unknown, even to historians, until classified files were finally released and researchers began to piece together the full scope of what she had accomplished. And today, she is recognized as one of the greatest spies in American history, a woman who refused to let prejudice or disability or danger stop her from serving the cause she believed in. And her legacy reminds us that courage comes in many forms, and that the people who change history are not always the ones who stand in the spotlight. She once said that her greatest hope was that her work could help bring some of the boys home, and we know now that it did, because the bridges she destroyed and the intelligence she gathered and the fighters she trained saved countless American lives on D-Day, and in the campaign that followed, and every soldier who made it home. Because a rail line was cut or a German convoy was ambushed owes something to the limping lady who walked through occupied France with a target on her back and freedom in her heart. And that is the legacy of Virginia Hall, the forgotten female spy who changed the fate of World War II.